I'm here with Dan Lowe, and we're going to talk about the Jesuits today. It's a subject that is pretty mysterious, and none of us know near enough about. But I think it was Dan that just mentioned a minute ago that we probably know more or as much about it as anybody. So
what you mean, we white man?
Hey, I'm part Navajo. No, I'm not. I'm part Sioux. I'm not part Navajo. But
Lenape.
So,
Okay.
we're going to talk about the Jesuits today.
Can you tell us what they are?
The Jesuits is actually called the Society of Jesus, and it was a group. It's, unless you're Catholic, it's difficult to understand. But basically, it's a charter. It's a religious sect or part of the Catholic Church. The Society of Jesus, and they take an oath of piety and poverty, and the Jesuits were actually the scholars, the educated people that were actually answered directly to the Pope at one time. They did not answer to the King of Spain or to the government of France or any of these other groups, even though there were French Jesuits and Spanish Jesuits, and what's the other group over there by Spain and France? The Castilians, Portuguese Jesuits. And so when you get to the New World, you had the French coming in the back door, you had the Spanish coming in from South America and from Mexico, and who knows, I mean, maybe there are Portuguese here too. But anyway, yeah, the Jesuits were the educated group in the Catholic Church that were the teachers, and they actually made an agreement with the King of Spain that they could go to the New World, they could proselyte to the natives, and they could also mine and take of the wealth of the land as long as the king got his. I think he was supposed to get 10%. Wasn't the fifth? That was later, but
I understood 20%.
Maybe it's 20.
Don't know.
It might be 20%, but I think you're right. It was 80-20. The king got 20%, and the Jesuits got 80%. But as we get deeper into this, you'll see that the king started to lose faith because he was actually paying for their protection. He sent them out there with supplies, and then they were supposed to give him 20% of what wealth they could come up with, and he wasn't seeing any of it.
They just up and disappeared, and
Didn't
he's looking
communicate
at
with
it
him.
as, from an investment standpoint. He's thinking, holy shit, where's my money?
Exactly. And because they spoke direct, and it's because they were responsible directly to the Pope instead of to the actual kings, it caused a problem for, what, I think it was Carlos?
Yeah, I think so.
Carlos.
Now, wasn't there 2 separate times that the Jesuits were called in to answer?
Yes, I think so. I know the one was in the 1660s.
Right, well, it was before the Pueblo Revolt.
Right.
Yeah.
It was before the Pueblo Revolt, and then the Franciscans came in, or I don't know how to pronounce it. Franciscans.
You did very well.
Okay.
Franciscans.
All right.
Not bad for New
Just like
Zealand.
Escalante.
Mm-hmm. It's Escalante.
If you say Escalante to a Spanish person, they will look at you like you are a peon.
You say potato, I say potato. Near the revolt.
And then the Franciscans came in to fill that void, and while they were there, nobody really knows what happens to the treasure of the Jesuits because it didn't go back with them. They were supposed to bring it back with them.
Well, let's put yourself in their shoes, okay? First off, anybody who claims to know anything about Jesuits, Franciscans, etc., cannot say one way or the other as to where they come from. I don't necessarily mean country and such. I'm talking about, is this order of Jesuits or Franciscans an extension of an older order, in the very same way that the Order of Christ was an extension of the Templars. Maybe extension's not the correct word, but let's call it a continuation.
And the Templars were actually a continuation or a lead off from the Solomon's Temple.
Okay, yeah, we go that. And I've often wondered, were the Jesuits misunderstood also? Like the Knights Templars. You know, we watch all the rhetoric on TV today about how the Jesuits were a group of men who became too powerful. And, you know, they were running all over the place, gathering the wealth of the world. And they became a threat.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how, but they became a threat.
Right.
And I think the obvious is probably the truth, and that is one man saw a way to eliminate his debt with them. We won't mention any names, King Philip. And I think the Vatican, I think there was a little jealousy going on there because the Knights Templars were so admired by the people for their doings. Now, I'm not buying into this little wooden cup thing, okay? I don't think these guys got all dressed up in these cute little skirts and a red cross and ran all over the world trying to hide a little wooden cup, okay? Dig a hole, bury the damn thing, and forget about it. No one's gonna find it. It wasn't about a little wooden cup.
No, it was about the bloodline.
Exactly.
Yeah,
the,
it was
the true grail.
Yeah, it was protecting the descendants.
And you know, I don't think that anyone with any intelligence can deny, once you've gone in and you look at the genealogical record of the kings and their offspring, and you see the history of the way they did things for such a long period of time. And it's funny because it's almost like you have the English over here, and they're the ones that they really want to be the truest bloodline, the not the royal bloodline, we're talking about the holy bloodline.
The chosen bloodline, yeah.
But they wanted it so badly that they're constantly marrying their children off to the Welsh holy bloodline or the French holy bloodline.
Yeah.
And it's almost comical when you go through their genealogy and see two kids getting married, brother and sister, and then their kids have kids, and then those two get married, and they're trying to keep those two holy bloodlines in together to keep, I don't know, the highest number of blood, and they're always trying to keep it within the English.
Right. Well,
And even to this day, the English have the least.
All throughout the New Testament, the Old Testament and the New Testament, you know, the children of Israel were told to keep their bloodline pure,
True.
only to marry within
True.
their group.
But see, they weren't fighting for the
Crown.
the title of royal
Right.
bloodline, you know, being descendant of King Solomon, King David, where the promise first came from that they all coveted.
Well, don't you think that's why they took the bloodline and left to try to protect it from being fought over, washed out by...
Well, I can't name everybody involved, but just go back into the history and look at all the countries, the different governing powers that came against France and Wales and even Scotland.
Yeah.
And those are the people that were trying to destroy the holy bloodline, because if they got rid of the holy bloodline, there's no question they maintain the purest bloodline. But the bottom line is they never really had it. Yes, they married into it from time to time, but it most certainly wasn't the purest of bloodlines.
Yeah.
That was being carried through one of the branches of the Welsh and one of the branches of the French.
Well, let's get back to the Jesuits,
Who?
the Jesuits. The Jesuits were an interesting group of individuals. Like we talked about, they were the high society. They were actually the educated, the very educated. And I think that the kings and the rulers and even the Pope himself, with so many of the Jesuits out there in the New World and in the missionary field, having access to wealth and things like that without their oversight, I think they started to, like you said, get jealous, get concerned, and then while all this was going on, there was all these backstories. You know, they were fighting, the French were fighting against the Spanish, and the Spanish were fighting against the English, and so they always needed more money than they had. So they were trying to milk every bit of financial, you know, every bit of gold and silver out of this new world, and it wasn't coming back fast enough to satisfy their needs.
Well, okay, now, assuming, put yourself in their shoes, okay? They find out that they have been recalled and that they have to come and answer to the king, basically stand trial. And whether they were innocent or not, it's going to cause a panic in them.
Right.
The only thing that would be at risk would be the wealth.
Right.
And assuming that they weren't telling the king about it and so forth, that's the one thing they would have taken.
Gotten in trouble for it. Yeah.
But we also have to look at the possibility, and I've got a few good reasons to believe this could be a possibility. I'm beginning to believe that, like the Knights Templars, that the Jesuits were dealt an unfair hand. I think that they may have been a reasonably righteous group trying to carry out a purpose that was handed down from ancient times. I think it went from the Templars. They were annihilated. A group of them escaped, went to Portugal. I don't know how long it took before they set up a new order, but apparently it was long enough that the Vatican and the king fell for it, and next thing you know, you got the Order of Christ, which is basically the same thing. They have the same duties, they have the same responsibilities.
The same
and it wasn't
covenant
going
oaths.
out and trying to hide a little wooden cup, and it wasn't a quest to gather the wealth of the world and go hide it under a rock somewhere.
Right.
I don't know that the Order of Christ ever came to an end, okay? I don't recall ever reading where they were come against. But then you have this group, this Jesuits. I mean, I actually admire them because they weren't answering to the king.
Yeah.
That, and looking at everything that's been written about them, about how they were, you know, basically wicked people, and then they were hoarding up the world's wealth and everything. It's the whole story of the Knights Templars again. So I'm thinking maybe these Jesuits were a good group of people, kind of like the Templars, and they were actually trying to fulfill the duties of ancient times in distributing, protecting, and hiding not only the children of Christ, but the records.
You know,
So if someone comes against you, and you know there's a good possibility you're going to be executed, what are you going to hide up?
right.
You're going to hide up the records, the wealth, and the only other thing they're going to leave behind is the dead.
Right. Well, when you realize that the Jesuits that were in Mexico City and Santa Fe and all these closer in areas, they were pretty much rounded up without any warning. But there were many groups, you know, that were further out that it probably took months or even years before they were rounded up. And I think that in that period of time, see, they had connections with their Native American friends and their runners and their miners that were taking wealth and bringing supplies. And I think they got word of what was happening. And so that's where I think you got where these symbols and signs are carved into the canyon walls and the little monuments in configuration. And the caches, they had enough time in these outlying areas to hide and to cache their
Well,
and their
and not
records.
Yeah, not only did they have the many mission sites, they also had mission sites that there was no record of.
Exactly.
One case in point, I wish I could remember what it's called. I want to say Santa Maria.
There's a lot of
And
them.
it's now it's down in the California coast on the California side.
Yeah,
And they don't know where it is.
right.
There's been a lot of people look for it. We have certain clues as to where it could have been. But more importantly, across the bay was the port where missions sites, or should we say Jesuits, came from every direction, bringing their wealth to take it across the bay and hide it at this secret mission site that not even the Vatican knew about. Only the Jesuits knew about it.
Yeah,
Now, I don't think that's the only place where that took place. I think it may have also taken place very near here.
right. Well, you've got, and this is an obscure reference that I'm still doing research on and trying to find the leads on, but Gene Ballinger, used to be right in one of the treasure hunting books back in the 60s and the 70s. Thompson, in his book Lost Treasures on the Old Spanish Trail, George Thompson, he wrote that Gene Ballinger had made a reference in one of his treasure books or whatever about a group of Jesuit records that were found somewhere in a cave along the Virgin
Yeah,
River. We
yeah.
haven't been able to track that down yet.
Yeah, and he mentioned.
So if anybody
as I
knows about
recall,
that,
yeah,
put us in touch with,
There was
hopefully they're in a library or but I doubt it.
another place that was mentioned where they found leather books and binders and of old records was up at the north end of Great Salt Lake.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's actually been a couple places.
That's a very
And wouldn't that
interesting,
be awesome to find? I mean, come on.
that's a very interesting place up there too, because of that monument site that's further, that unmentioned monument site that's,
I have no idea what you're talking about.
well, I will say that it's
I
west of the
don't.
Great Salt Lake.
I'd rather you didn't elaborate.
Okay, I won't elaborate any further, but that's a
Don't
specific,
everybody unhear that,
I can
okay?
edit that out.
Now shut up. But it would be ridiculous to assume that that was the only place where that occurred.
Right,
Now, in the very same way that a majority of the people, academics, etc., just don't have a belief that the Spanish made it up into, for example, the Uinta Mountains,
right.
Idaho, Montana, Oregon. It's because we don't have a written record that says they did.
Well, Father Escalante was 1776, and in his record, he says that Garcia preceded him. So,
Well, not to mention the map that is associated with him. Very few people would seem to have seen it, but that map, it's got mission site after mission site after mission
All
site.
over.
What are you telling me? He built those along the way?
Yeah.
Who built them?
I think they go back even further than I think they were before the Spanish. They were,
Likely.
possibly, they were Castilian?
Well,
What's the Greek,
well, you can call them
Indo-Greek?
Castilians if you want. I'm just going to call them Romans.
Yeah, Romans.
But now you threw me off.
Sorry. We were talking about Garcias
You better be. Okay.
before Escalante.
For example, okay, Antonio de Espejo, you've heard this. Hardly anybody in Utah's heard about him, but
Right.
people in New Mexico know who he is.
Oh,
People in
he's
Texas
all
know
over
who
in
he
the
is.
archives.
In California, because they have a written record of it.
Yeah,
But if you read his expedition, 1582 to 83, yeah, it's very clear that he bugged out for quite a while.
it wasn't
In
until,
fact, the other priests were getting kind of worried because he was taking so long, but he
well,
went north in search of, what do he call it? The Lake of Gold. Okay? But anyway, as an example, just because you don't know about it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
right,
Now, we were talking about this one day about Jesuits being as far north as, say, Black Rock Canyon.
yeah,
Okay? Most people say, well, we don't have a record of that. I don't really give a shit. Okay? Okay, just because there's no record of it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right.
We have evidence that shows
Otherwise,
that there were more than likely Jesuits, because I'm telling you, the Spanish didn't use those symbols.
who put the big monuments up?
Well, that was all the sheep herders, haven't you heard?
Yeah, they have the lichen growth that's says it's 400 years old.
They knew how to grow it back then.
Sprinkle some fairy dust on there.
Lichen can be an excellent tool, but it can also be deceiving.
Right.
And I am talking about the Christos lichen.
Right.
And the Christos is the bright orange that you see.
Yeah, the green
On the
lichens
rocks.
can grow fairly fast.
And you want to look for the single spore. You know, it looks like a flower.
Yeah,
complete round.
it's not a fleck here and there. It's actually
Right.
all part of one
But see,
colony.
it depends on the climate you're in. If you're out in the desert climate, the Arizona Strip, or out west, or whatever, I dare say it's fairly
Pretty
accurate.
Right.
But I did find a site, and I still don't know what to make of it, but it was up on top of a mountain that gets a lot of rain and snow. And it's got lichen the size of a silver dollar.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't know, because not too far from there, I went to an old cemetery, and here's, you got headstones, 1890, and you got
Christos lichen
you
growing
got a
on.
single spore
Right.
that's bigger than a silver dollar. But see, it gets sprinkled, what, three days a week, 4 days a
Yeah, the
week?
sprinkler system.
See, the amount of water can change that. So you have to be careful, you have to consider all things.
Right.
Okay, back to Jesuits.
That's just on that before we go from there. That's why you look at core samples on the trees.
Yeah, you gotta look at
dendrology.
everything.
You look at the whole thing and you take that into consideration as a
Well,
evidence.
we went and visited a site today.
That's why we're on the topic.
Absolutely
of Jesuits.
incredible. And, it could have gone either way. But, it actually surprised me how much you actually have to consider. There was so much to see, but the majority of people, even certain self-proclaimed experts, they go out and take a superficial look at it and they, oh, that's modern creation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to tell you it ain't modern.
Well,
We had so much to look at today, and it all makes perfect sense. And I think one of the things that gives it credibility is that we know just a couple miles away is what we know to be a Jesuit site. Well, no, we don't have any records of Jesuits being up that far, or do we?
yeah.
We don't know for sure. I think Keno's the one that got the closest.
Yeah,
But how do
Keno's
we
mission.
know that Keno, like Antonio de Espejo, wasn't moonlighting like Espejo was and going north?
Well,
We don't know. Who built all those damn missions
I
that were all down there in southern Utah?
I agree with you, and I think that they were under the direction of a main mission that they sent out priests, miners, whatever, and they were in support of. Because you imagine you're living out in the wilderness, you got natives around you, you've got Spain supposed to be bringing you supplies, but you have all these needs, and if you're not taking care of your own needs, you might not get those things, and so. They had the charters, they had the legal ability and right to be able to send out miners, explorers, and if they found wealth, that would come back to your specific mission. They were supposed to send a percentage, 20% to the king,
Well,
but it probably didn't always happen.
the thing that was absolutely fascinating about what I went to look at today, and there's so much I want to say about it, but I can't yet because it's bigger than what I might imply. But picture a stone cross on the ground with a shield around it. Not a circle, not an oval, not a, I don't know what the hell they call it, so we're gonna forget I ever said it. It's a shield, okay? The only culture, well, not culture, the only people, the only organization I have ever seen that used that exact setup. And this is the Christian cross flared at the ends. Not the ones that are flared wide at the top and slowly go in all the way to the center of the cross. That's Knights Templar.
Right.
Okay?
The Templar cross.
But when it goes straight up and then flares at the end, on all four ends, with a shield around it, that's the Order of Christ.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, they're the only ones that ever used it. Did the Jesuits use it? I don't know.
If anybody knew about that, it would be the Jesuits.
Now, what is that? It's a seal,
Yeah.
okay? Like you write a letter, okay? You stuff it in an envelope, put it on there, you melt some wax on it, and you take your
Ring.
your Order of Christ cross with the shield on it, and you stamp it. It's sealed, okay? My question is, what's sealed and underneath the ground where that's at? Because there's only three things they're gonna leave behind.
Yeah. Records.
Records, wealth,
Wealth.
and they're dead.
Yep. And they're not gonna put their dead underneath something like that.
These,
Not in my view.
this thing was not meant to be found. It's not, well, it's kind of like the mystery glyphs.
Well-
You're not gonna be out just riding your horse along and go, oh, holy shit, look at that.
It's in a off the beaten path
A
area.
difficult place to get to.
And then it's big enough that when you're looking at it on the ground, you don't see it and register unless you're looking for it.
I walked right to it and didn't see it.
Wasn't it discovered from
A drone.
a drone?
I'm sure other people saw it long before that, but nobody's ever talked about it.
Right.
And the people have been there for what, 170 years?
Yeah.
And only recently somebody has said, oh, by the way,
Right.
it was fascinating.
Yeah.
Turned one of the rocks over, okay, because we wanted to see the calcite on the bottom,
Yeah.
and we wanted to see how deep the hole is. The hole the rock left when you turn it over was about 2 inches deep, okay? I would have expected maybe 4 or 5 inches, but it doesn't matter. Calcite, definitely there. But the rock that we turned over, you could also see the calcite still attached to the rock from way back when it was first initially moved.
Right there.
Very thin and patchy. And the only place where that calcite still exists above ground is in shaded areas or areas that are away from
Yeah, where the rain
southern
and the wind's
sun.
not hitting it in the sun.
the southern summer sun and the western summer sun.
Right, predominant.
Everything else, you can see the light color where it used to be,
Right.
but there was a thin layer of calcite still there. So, so what? What have you got to compare to? Well, you know as well as I do that there's two possible times, unless some event has gone undocumented,
Right.
we know that there's at least two possible times when that lava flowed.
Yeah, 1100 or 1000
Either
years ago.
1100 years ago or 2000 years ago.
Right.
The likelihood is 1100 years ago because it is right on the border of Colorado Plateau uplift.
Right.
And it fits beautifully in with the, shall we call it hearsay evidence, the stories of the Paiutes when this,
Yeah, the Washoe Indians and the Paiutes.
yeah, the Washoe, the Paiute,
When the earthquake and the
and there's fire shooting from the
volcanoes
ground
and
and
the
so
water
forth.
ran out.
Probably the same incident, okay?
Probably.
But again, doesn't matter. So what we did is we looked for a rock that we know damn well hasn't moved since that plateau was created.
Right, part of the
Okay.
uplift.
I mean, yeah, sure, some cowboy could have, no, he couldn't have, because he couldn't have got his horse up there. Let's just say it was probably a good choice of rocks.
Right.
Probably hasn't moved since the day that thing was created.
Yeah.
And we turned it over. And sure enough, it had a beautiful amount of calcite on the bottom of it, 4-inch deep hole. If it was 1100 years ago, That 4 inches represents 1,100 years.
Right.
Roughly 275 years per inch,
Right.
okay? So you could reasonably
You
assume,
had 2 inches on
yeah,
the formation.
you could reasonably assume that this rock cross, when we turned that rock over and we had about 2 inches of depth,
550.
could have easily have been
500 years.
550 years.
Yeah, that's a long time. ago.
Easily.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what I believe. You have to look at everything.
Right.
But what if it was 2,000 years ago?
Then
And
you're
each
talking
inch-
about a whole different group
Each
of
inch
people.
would represent up to 500 years. We could be talking 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Do I think that's the case? Probably not.
Yeah.
I think these Jesuits that we know were in that area, I don't care whether they're on record or not.
Let me throw something out there that goes along with this.
Can I saunter in there and grab another cup of coffee?
Let me mention this first, and then you
No.
can saunter in. I'll check my battery.
Okay.
When Father Escalante went through the Utah Valley and then went south, and eventually at the crossing of the Fathers, that was 1776.
Okay.
When they went through the central Utah, they came across heavily bearded Utah Indians, Y-U-T-A. So at some point, that's not a native trait to the Native Americans. That trait had to have come from somewhere, and so that's just something to think about. In that one area, Utes, they called them Utes, they spoke the Ute language, that were heavily bearded, and that's the only place that they found along their journey. So what you're talking about, it's possible there was a group of people in that area that had European influence much earlier,
Not only
possibly.
possible, but highly probable. Because,
I'm back here with Dan Lowe. We're talking about the Jesuits. We had to take a coffee break, and so Dan, we're back at where the Jesuits were. We were talking about how the Jesuits came in. They were a little bit secretive. They got ejected a couple of times, once by the Crown, even earlier. And they went through the Indian Revolt, which is a whole topic we could spend an hour on easily.
which we're not going to do.
But recently, one of the earlier areas that we know the Jesuits were in Utah especially was in the northern Utah, the Basin area, where a lot of the old mines are. And you recently wrote an article in there about some of those mines. You want to talk about that, or did you want to start somewhere else?
The Josephine?
Yeah, the Josephine has been kind of a, you just did an article in Tuscarora.
I did.
Well, I read it anyway. I don't know, maybe you were
No, I must have
sleepwalking
missed
when
that
you
one.
wrote it.
Well, it probably wouldn't be, what's the word I'm looking for?
Do you think
there,
the
there is a likelihood that the Jesuits were in the UNS. I admit it's vague at this point, but you know, what did they name it? The Josephine
Yeah, the name, the Josephine.
of, hell, I can't remember the name.
The Martinique.
Yeah, it was a little island over in,
She was actually a French princess.
yeah, she was
She
French.
wasn't-
She
she
wasn't Spanish.
Well, and that in and of itself, to me, says Jesuit, because there were French Jesuits, there were Spanish Jesuits. Why would there be a mine named after a French princess?
Dedicated to a French princess. And that kind of puzzled me also, and I actually hadn't even thought about Jesuits being in that neck of the woods. But what was the question?
Well, the question was, explain, there's a lot of conjecture about where the Josephine de Martinique
yeah.
was. Some people
Well-
say it was in the Henry, some say it was
Yeah,
in Hoyt's Peak, some say it was somewhere
But that
else.
article wasn't necessarily, and it mentioned in there, we're not talking about the Henrys, we're not talking about the Superstition Mountains or any other place. We're talking about a very specific place in the west end of the Uinta Mountains near Camas. And basically what I was trying to point out is that there's a reel of mines up there, okay, at least 7 that I know of, and you could probably include a couple more in that, but depending on whose map you're looking at and whose information you're gleaning, any one of 3 of those mines could have been referred to as the Josephine. Now, I'm not saying one of them made a mistake or this one made a mistake. They could actually all be a part of and considered the Josephine mine.
Right.
But it isn't just one. I mean, I got one map that very clearly points out what I believe is John Young's location, the first discovery he made. I got another one that, as far as I'm concerned, it is a mine site that I've only showed a few people. And I'm not even sure we're in the exact spot. In fact, I've recently decided I need to look a little further to the south. And I'd have to show you why I suspect that.
Now, there was on the Facebook page, I don't remember which site it was on in Facebook, it was one of the groups we both belong to. There was a comment about that you or somebody made a comment about the Josephine, and I've done a lot of research, and my personal view is that it was the Martinique family or a family along that line that had a reel of mines or a group of mines, and they claimed them as the Josephine mines, and they were mining those different areas, and they were all Josephine mines because it was part of their company.
The
Martinique.
Yeah, thank you. That's a place.
Right.
It's Josephine of
Martinique, right.
Thank you again.
Well, did you know, and I just recently discovered this, that my theory is that because of my research, is that none of these Josephine mines are lost. They were merely hidden and covered up, and then they left, and that the family still knows where these mines are because we have evidences of Spanish coming back
Well, not only
to
that.
check on their mines.
Not only that, there was a particular map, and it's actually gotten to be a fairly well-known map. It's been published now. Don't know why, but it has been. We call it the Pedro Nunez map, or the half map, okay?
Which is part of your,
Now,
you've put that in your master map.
it's incorporated into the master map recreation.
Right.
Okay, and there was 70 some odd maps to choose from, and it was a little overwhelming at first. I thought, how the hell am I going to incorporate all these maps? But
surprisingly,
they did. But as I went through them, I got hold of the individual who first received the map and find the backstory on it and so forth. And if there was anything that just didn't meet my criteria, if it was questionable in the slightest, I'd toss the map out. I'm not going to use it unless I can personally give credibility to the map because of certain things. It might be something on the map that if this map was a hoax, there's no way in God's green earth this individual would have come up with that.
They wouldn't have had that information that ties to this landmark.
Right.
The Spanish,
something that I've been to, seen, and know is there is on the map, but they sure as hell didn't know it when they faked the map,
and
right?
the Spanish never knew Google Earth was going to come into existence, so they probably would have done some things different. No, seriously, haven't you found that through Google Earth, you've been able to put together a lot of things that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to do?
Well, what made that possible was the overlay that I created as a result of recreating that master map in a 30-minute map-based format.
But I find it extremely interesting that when you got the master map put in, and then I started doing some research and looking on Google Earth and exploration and going into the field, I started finding mining locations, some of the open mining and some of the different things that we've found that tie into those locations on
Yeah.
the master
Yeah.
map. And I mean, and they say in the
Well,
documents.
I recently put some photos on Facebook, and I think I since deleted them. I don't know why I do that. It's just, I like to make
You
people
start to
think.
get nervous about
I
all
went
the
and put all these
information.
yellow pins, okay?
Yeah,
And no, those pins were not arbitrarily just
scattered
put all over. Those are actual,
sites.
what I believe are ancient mining operations, and I don't mean Spanish.
Right.
And that's all I said when I put that post
But
up.
some of them were used by the Spanish.
Well, yes, but I went and put those yellow pins on. There's something like 120 of them.
Right.
And I'm 99% sure that each and every one of them is an ancient mining operation. And that's all I referred to them as. So
Right.
when I put the picture up there, everybody, is thinking
Freaked
Spanish
out.
mines.
Right.
Well, I waited a few days, and then I went and added in all the Spanish mines.
Yeah. Known.
Clearly, I'm not talking about Spanish mines with those yellow pins.
Right.
The likelihood is Roman.
Well, we know that the largest percentage of mines that the Spanish mined and found were already mines that were in existence and either shown to them by the Native Americans or they saw with their own two eyes that it was a mining operation at some
Yes,
time.
but we both know that the Spanish were never in the Uintas, so.
Well,
Show me a sign.
well, the Jesuits, I think that the Jesuits were there. I think the Jesuits, either the French Jesuits or the Spanish Jesuits, were the first Spanish that were in the basin area.
Well, we've got enough evidence that we know the French made it into the Colorado mountains, and
Sure.
it's really not that much further, and so.
It's no stretch of the imagination.
To me, it seems highly probable that they made it over to the Uintas.
Right.
And I think the biggest thing about that, why I would believe that, is because I know that the information that the French had may not have been exactly what the Spanish had, and it may not have been exactly what the Portuguese had, the Welsh, the Scottish, and everybody else who's been here, Romans. But all of their information seems to corroborate one particular place that they were focused on finding, and that is the Uinta Mountains.
Yep.
Now, I know,
Isn't it interesting along that line? You have thousands or at least many hundreds of years of people looking for this location. Who showed up in the Uintas after the Etosha was discovered?
Bob Marley.
Yeah. No, I thought it was the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Could have been. Oh, you mean that one guy?
Mel Fisher.
Yeah, that Fisher guy.
When he found the Etosha, 2 years after he discovered the Etosha, why did he show up in the Uintas and hire
Well,
our Vietnam friend, buddy, to go help him find?
Originally when I first heard a rumor of that, I thought, that sounds a little convenient. But after sitting down and talking to Steve Warby, and you'd have to know Steve Warby. You're talking to one of the finest men that
Salt
God
of the
ever
earth.
created on this earth, and he's as honest as the day is long. And I've said it once and I'll say it again, if he told me the sky was pink with blue polka dots, I wouldn't bother going out to look.
Hey,
He's
Fisher
just,
showing up in the Uintas is a matter of public record. It was printed in the newspaper.
well, see, and I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the Ute tribe had, there's a record of
Yeah.
their minutes when he went to the meeting and made them an offer.
But when I asked Warby about it, he says, well, hell yes, he was in the Uintas.
Yeah.
And I said, well, how do you know that? And he says, because he hired me to take him out there as a guide.
Patsy Sursa was right there too.
Yeah, and I think Patsy knew that.
Yeah,
and
she did.
There was another incident that occurred over at the Hoyt Peak area. to a friend of mine whom we will refer to as Wild Bill. And
Was that when the helicopter
yeah,
landed up there and all the armed?
I don't remember the details,
Yeah.
or I'm just saying that to excuse myself out of answering.
Well, no, there is a documented account, or at least it was written about, where a helicopter landed and armed people got out and they were in that area for a day and a half and then they left.
Yeah,
But what really gets me, plausible deniability, Mel Fisher, or Mel, what is it?
Mel Fisher.
Yeah, Mel Fisher. His daughter, to this day, I've talked to her, tried to ask her information. She will deny every bit that he ever came to the UNS. And yet we have it on public record
And yet
that
we
he was
have
there.
eyewitnesses who will tell you, bullshit, she stood right here in front of my desk and bought things from us and so forth. She was absolutely here.
Patsy knows the guy who was the chief of the tribe at the time when he was here and in the meeting, and all of that information is public record.
How'd we get on the?
Well, we're
list?
talking
Okay.
about,
Oh.
we're talking about everybody, every civilization for the last how many hundreds of years has come to the basin looking for something.
Yeah, and what? What is it
Except
they're
for the
looking for?
Aztecs.
What were they looking for?
The Aztecs got
Well,
out of the
Aztecs
area.
weren't looking for it because they already knew where it was,
They left the basin,
because they felt they had been cursed.
probably because Kapala, Lake Uinta drained.
Yeah,
Something
what
happened.
caused that?
Well, the Colorado Plateau uplift.
What's that?
It,
Oh no, that was 33 million years ago.
you know that movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy, where the Coke
Yeah,
bottle falls
yeah.
out of the sky and hits the guy on the head? What if you're a group of Aztecs peacefully living on your Lake Kapala, fishing, mining, doing your thing, and all of a sudden the Yellowstone volcanoes start going off, and then over here another volcano goes off. All of a sudden this ground starts rumbling, and before night falls the ground has come up 3 feet.
Well, how about this? 3 feet.
Well, it kept going up.
How about hundreds of
It
feet?
kept going up, but at some point they said, we have got to get out of here. The
Let's
gods
put
are
it
mad
this
at
way,
us.
there was such a dramatic change that it went from semi-tropical to high desert.
High desert plateau. Yeah.
That wasn't exactly a minor earthquake.
Kings Peak
Okay.
is what, 14, 13 something thousand feet?
Well, remnants of King Peak has been there for a long
Yeah.
time, but you were gonna ask me a question about pictures.
Today, from your adventure today?
What adventure today?
Yeah. Yeah, are you gonna be able to, can we
I,
put some of those
there is
pictures
one
out
of
there?
them. Yes, there is one of the pictures. Nice save, Dan. There is a picture or two that I believe I can share at this point.
Okay.
Some people will recognize it. Those who recognize it, based upon what some other proclaimed expert said, don't be too quick to discount the authenticity of it. That's mainly what I went there today for.
Right.
I needed closure in my mind as to whether it is authentic or not. I
Right.
already knew, I already felt it, but I had to see it because I've been disappointed before, and I'm not one to make up bullshit stories. I have to know.
Right.
And let's put it this way, it's at that point now to where I know damn well if I took a geologist up there, that there isn't one facet of what I concluded based upon what I saw and what I tested that he would argue with. I think he would very much agree with me.
Right.
I don't think that there is a reasonable archaeologist out there that could deny some of the things that we looked at today to determine whether this is an authentic site or not.
Right.
It is absolutely an authentic site. The only real question is, how old is it?
Right.
The bare minimum, it has to be, based on the evidence, it has to be bare minimum 250 years ago.
Right.
And that's being very safe,
Right.
okay? The likelihood is that it's 300 to 600 years ago.
Okay.
And the evidence is pretty clear.
Well, we know there's a site not too far away from there where the Spanish were mining, the Spanish or the Jesuits or the Franciscans, somebody was mining there.
It had to be Jesuit.
And I think it had to be Jesuit too, because there is, for one thing, there's no record that we know of.
You know, there's plenty of stories about
Right.
things that have existed in that area.
There's plenty of things about existed.
Mission,
And then we have
Rasta.
we have some carvings in the stone
We do?
that tell the cache site. There is we have the old Spanish trail that goes right through that area. We have
We have
names.
silver.
We have the silver mine that was mined, that when the pioneers and the other miners that were there were mining at Silver Reef.
There's the
There was
namesakes all
evidence.
over the place.
Yeah, there was evidence of
Somebody
old
obviously
mines.
recognized it at one point, or they wouldn't have named all those different features, the names they gave them.
Right. The pioneers obviously knew, in fact, in one of my great-great-grandfather homesteaded at the mouth of Zion's Park, William Crawford. And in one of his diaries, he has a notation of the Spanish workings in one of the canyons or one of the areas. We're chasing a lead on an Arasta. We have old structures that cannot be attributed to anybody, any pioneers that we know of, that we found and photographed. And then we have a lot of surface mining that went on from both the pioneers and previous to the pioneers. So somebody was there before the pioneers, before they discovered pure silver in sandstone.
Okay, so how do we wrap this up?
Well, let's just say a few things about the Jesuit treasure signs, if you know anything about that. That's one thing I've been
Well,
trying to, is that worth even mentioning, or
You know, there's a lot of books out there, and
maybe
each and every one of those books, and I'm not saying this one's a bad one, this one's a good one, but there's a lot of books out there, Spanish signs and symbols, or signs and symbols of the Spanish. There's several different names.
Right.
Now, if you had a copy of each of them, it's very clear that the latter authors clearly borrowed their information
From the earlier
verbatim.
ones.
I mean,
Right.
actually copied
Copied
the
them.
pictures
Right.
but
90% of the stuff.
out of those 5 books, there's a couple of them I prefer over the others.
Right.
But where did their information come from?
90% of the things they've got drawn or shown, I've never seen on a rock or a tree. And I've been to many, many sites that are considered Jesuit. And a lot of them
The
were
thing that
carved by
bothered me-
later people that were trying to pass it off as Spanish or
The
Jesuit.
thing that bothered me is the only thing that was clear when going through those books is, okay, here we have this guy who clearly drew his own symbols, put them in his book, and said, this is what this means, this is what this means, and that's what this means.
Right.
But there's absolutely
No proof or evidence.
no proof or evidence, no background, no original source material, nothing.
Right.
We are left to take his word for it.
Speculation and
Yeah,
experience.
it doesn't mean I don't believe them.
Right.
The ones that I do give credibility to, the meaning attributed is borrowed from the Native American petroglyphs.
Right.
And that's why I would give credibility to it, because I know that a lot of those symbols came from Native American glyph meaning.
Right.
And I'm sure there'd be a group of people out there going, you know, that Native American petroglyphs are just a bunch of scribbling and,
Yeah.
you know, I've heard it all. I've been out with, I can't count how many archaeologists and it's just amazing at the
Ignorance.
ignorance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's something to it when we're at these petroglyph sites and then we go to the Spanish sites. You can see how they've incorporated
Yeah.
either
Now-
from the natives or obviously the natives didn't incorporate from them. We're just talking about the monuments.
What monuments? Oh, the monuments.
Yeah. The formation of monuments, cache sites, or leading to a location
Yeah.
or away from a
After
location.
looking at, I would have to say, I could almost say hundreds of monuments. God, I don't know how many of them I photographed, but after looking at that many of them and seeing both sheep herder monuments, monuments that were made by, I can't remember his name, down in Fish
Fish Lake,
Creek area, huh?
Fish Lake area. Yeah, Fish
Yeah,
Lake.
Fish Lake area. I mean, we know they're not Spanish. We know they're not ancient. We have a video that shows him building them.
Or adding to them or whatever he was doing,
But-
you don't know.
You know, you wouldn't think so, but when you walk up to a monument, there's certain characteristics that tells the tale,
Sure.
but you gotta know what to look for.
And you can go look at the historical records and when these first come into reference in some areas, and you can know that they were there for a long time, or they were meant when they were built to stay for a long time versus a sheep herder's monument.
Well, you know what
Or
the
a
funny
trail
thing
marker.
is, and I hope putting this on camera doesn't change the narrative. You go talk to any Forest Service individual out there and you tell them that you know where a Spanish carving is on a tree, for hell's sakes, don't
do
tell
it.
them where it is,
Yeah,
because they will go get rid of it.
now we'll cut it down. The
But
other
they
thing
will
is,
not touch a monument with a 40-foot pole.
you're right,
It is a legal claim marker. I don't give a shit who built it.
right. The other thing is though, is don't tear down or dig up the monuments looking for treasure.
Oh my
They didn't
God.
bury the treasure under the frickin' monument.
Can you believe there's people out there? How do I be nice about this?
I don't really know that there's a way to be nice about it.
Who are so misinformed to believe that some Spanish guy was hauling off a couple carts full of gold bars, you know, pulled by a couple of red dun mules, and he just for some reason couldn't take it all with him, so he dug a hole and buried it and built a big monument on top of it.
Exactly.
There is nothing in the damn monuments. Don't tear them apart.
I don't know how many of them that I've seen over the years that you go there 1 month and then a year later you go there and somebody's rearranged the whole damn thing looking for treasure.
Well, I have one particular monument. Fortunately, they didn't destroy it, but somebody definitely dug into it. And I have a good idea who it was.
Yeah.
A self-proclaimed expert from